Ayo, we're basically in the final stretch of 2024, if this vid manages to come out before Wednesday, but it's been a pretty good year for the UFC as a whole, especially when it comes to all of the title fights that's happened. So let's go through and rate each UFC title fight that's happened in 2024. And before we start, I just got to say that this list is entirely in my opinion. I know that most of y'all would probably have completely different opinions and ratings on some of the title fights that's happened this year, but that's what makes videos like this so fun to make. So let's get into it. For the first bunch of UFC title fights we had this year were Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis at UFC 297, Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria at UFC 298, and Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera at UFC 299. For Strickland versus du Plessis, I'd honestly give it a 7 out of 10. Mainly because I'm one of those people that thinks the way Strickland fights by throwing jabs and 1 or 2 front kicks for the full 25 minutes is boring as hell. And while the build up to the fight was entertaining and funny as fuck, as always, Sean didn't fight like how he always says he likes to fight in his interviews. But the other reason as to why I gave this fight a 7 out of 10 is because of how fucking close it was. To this day, there are still pretty valid arguments from both sides, saying that either Strickland won or du Plessis won. But personally, I'm on the side that thinks du Plessis won the fight, and hopefully they can both give us a fight where we can get a clear winner in February at UFC 312. For Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria, I'd obviously have to give this fight a 10 out of 10. From Ilia's mind games and confidence in the fight's build-up to him going out there and finishing Volk in the way that he did, there's absolutely no doubt that this fight is one of the best fights that's happened this year. Or maybe I'm just an Ilia Topuria glazer, I don't know. And for O'Malley versus Chito Vera at UFC 299, I feel like this fight deserves either a 9.5 or a 10 out of 10, solely because of Sean O'Malley's performance that night. And say what you want about O'Malley, yeah, he could be corny at times, but his striking that night was absolutely beautiful. And while Chito didn't do much on his end to make the fight engaging, it did help raise O'Malley's stock up just a little bit more. And while UFC 300 probably could have had its own rating video, I feel like solely for Pereira versus Hill, this one could also be either a 9.5 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 fight. But for my list, I'm gonna give it a 9.5 out of 10. The only reason why is honestly kind of nitpicky, but I do wish that the fight did go on for a little bit longer. And while it would have still ended in the same way that it did with Alex Pereira knocking the shit out of Jamal Hill, it would have been nice to see Hill show off whatever skills he said he had after coming back from his ACL injury the year prior. Alexandre Pantoja versus Steve Erceg, or 301 as a whole, is probably the only UFC event this year that I didn't really pay that much attention to, only because I was still hyped from everything that happened at UFC 300 and was even more hyped for everything that's happening at 302 and for Conor's return at UFC 303. And while I still think that those things shouldn't have affected my rating of this fight, I'd still give it either a 6 or a 6.5 out of 10. The fight was good, it's just that there wasn't that much action from Pantoja, but just like with UFC 297 and Pantoja's rematch against Moreno, there is the argument that Erceg got robbed by the judges, and I honestly had Erceg winning the fight, but it's whatever. I honestly still wish that Conor versus Chandler did end up happening at UFC 303, but at least we ended up getting another Alex Pereira fight. Despite the fight being hella entertaining and exciting, I've always been one of those people that thinks that the rematch wasn't really needed, because the outcome was already predetermined way before 303 happened. But putting that little nitpick aside, I'd have to still give this fight a 10 out of 10, mainly due to Alex Pereira's incredible performance as always. For UFC 304, we finally have 2 title fights that's happening in the same event, excluding all female title fights. We have Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad and Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blades. For Aspinall versus Blades, this fight definitely makes up for the first run-in with each other, with Tom proving to everyone once again why he's the interim champ, and some could even go as far as saying that he's the heavyweight champ. And with Leon versus Bilal, this fight is honestly on the lower part of my list, mainly because of Leon's lazy and boring performance against Bilal. Say what you want about Bilal's methods of winning a fight, but his performance at 304 showed why he deserved to become welterweight champ, and why he's going to be champ for a little longer than some hoped. But with that being said, I'd give Leon versus Bilal a 6.5 out of 10, and Aspinall versus Blades a 9 out of 10, only because the interim champ shouldn't have to be defending his belt. After Izzy knocked the shit out of Alex in their rematch last year, I genuinely thought that we were about to get a new and hungry Israel Adesanya. But then the Strickland fight happened, and even after that, I still had hope that he'd be able to get the belt back. But he just ended up getting walked and subbed by Dricus in their fight at UFC 305 in August. With the amount of hype that was built around this fight, with both Dricus and Izzy arguing about who the real African champ is, it ended up being like every other Israel Adesanya title fight, where he counters and point fights by throwing jabs and leg kicks for the full 25 minutes. But thankfully, Dricus' pressure, his wrestling, and his plot armor put an end to Izzy's effective but boring fight style, which is why I'd give this fight a solid 7.5 out of 10. My feelings towards Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili really is kind of the same as Bilal Muhammad versus Leon Edwards and O'Malley versus Chito Vera, where Merab's performance alone is what gets this fight such a high rating. Obviously, there are a lot of people that don't enjoy Merab shooting for 1,000,000 takedowns in a fight and him not going for a finish. But I feel like if you're able to look beyond that and appreciate the way he constantly keeps the pressure on his opponents and makes it hard for them to get started, I feel like a lot of people will start to appreciate Merab's fight style just a bit more. But with all of that being said, I'm gonna give this fight a decent 8.5 out of 10. Alex Pereira versus Khalil Rountree is another fight that I think there's not even much I need to say. It's definitely a fight of the year contender, and it's definitely a 10 out of 10 fight. Even though I still think that Rountree didn't deserve the title shot, he absolutely proved that he is champion material by giving Pereira one of his hardest fights at light heavyweight. Without a doubt in my mind, this fight was always going to be a 10 out of 10 fight, no matter who the winner was. Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway was a guaranteed banger from the moment Max knocked out Gaethje and called Ilia out. And as a semi-proud Ilia Topuria glazer myself, watching him knock out someone as good and someone that has as strong as a chin that Max has was nice to see. But no hate to Max though. And I feel like when it comes to most fans' opinions on John Jones versus Stipe Miocic, majority of us would say that this fight was completely pointless. And while I do agree, John's performance that night was absolutely flawless. The only reason why this fight is a 9 and not a 10 out of 10 fight is mainly because of the fact that Stipe shouldn't have been the one that got the title shot, and it should have been Tom Aspinall versus John Jones that night instead. Alexandre Pantoja's fights are always one that are really good but hella underrated, since Pantoja doesn't really get the attention and the respect that he deserves. But his fight against Kaya Sakura earlier this month definitely showed newer fans that Pantoja is that guy, with him absolutely dominating Asakura and sleeping him in the second round and ending the year off with a solid 9.5 out of 10. And obviously, my opinion and ratings are probably completely different from most of y'all's, so please let me know what you guys think and what your ratings would be for each title fight that's happened this year. And thank you guys for all the support on the last video, it actually means a lot. And please feel free to like and subscribe, and thank you all for watching.